Hello, I'm Soycat and welcome back to my second channel geopolitical news videos. Today I wanted to talk about Russia-Ukraine tensions because they have been rising quite a bit, with a lot of people fearing a Russian invasion of Ukraine. Something you'd be correct to fear because today Russia ordered their troops into eastern Ukraine, and fun fact, if you send your military into another country's territory without that country's permission, that is considered an invasion. And so Russia just invaded Ukraine, right? But the crazy thing about it is that Russia argues, no, we actually didn't invade Ukraine, and what we did have to do, we're really mad about it. This is all on the conscience of the ruling regime in Kyiv, in the capital of Ukraine. How is that humanly possible that Putin comes out being like, yeah, we're mad, we didn't commit an invasion, and actually they have some sliver of grey area that they're obviously heavily exploiting, but how does that grey area exist in the first place? Because last I checked, the two cities that they did send their troops into, Luhansk and Donetsk, on a map very clearly show they are part of Ukraine. There's no grey area like with Crimea, which we'll come into later in this video, but as you can see, they're very clearly in Ukraine. Russia clearly sent their troops over, and there is still some amount of like, ooh, yeah, this is using that ugly side of why we have to talk about it so much in this video, and so let's explain what's happening. Obviously, I think this is an issue that's going to perhaps escalate, if not in the next week, then over the next few years, because we have seen that Russia is a very strong bent towards taking some things from Ukraine. Why is that the case in the first place? We should perhaps say, why are Russia and Ukraine having any issues whatsoever? Because funnily enough, they're some of the closest countries in the world. In fact, a lot of people who live in the eastern half of Ukraine are not just, Ukrainians that are friends with Russians, they are ethnically Russians themselves. If you look at this map right here, you can see that Russian is the native language of a fair part of the population, but also, not only do they speak Russian, but they're ethnically considered to be Russians as well. And so Ukraine has a very interesting situation as a country where they don't just have Ukrainians living there, they have people from a neighboring, very, very big country, by the way, that live there too. It gets even more interesting when you look at the history of Russia and Ukraine, because we all know Russia, like if you look at a map, it's the biggest country in the world, and it's not even really close to second, third, and fourth, which by the way, second, third, and fourth countries, Canada, the US, and China, they're all huge in their own right, mind-blowingly large, but Russia is larger than all of them because they have all of this land out here. But that's not always been the case. Most of this land was claimed in the same time that European countries were going off to, like Africa or Southeast Asia or South America. In fact, the core of Russia has always been where the big cities are in the west. Most of Russia lives in the European portion of Russia, and I'm saying Russia too much. So most of the people in this country live in the western portion of it. As you can see, this is where Moscow is, alarmingly close to other countries. This is where St. Petersburg is, and between these two cities, being the largest and having a huge population cluster between them, this is where the core of Russia really is. But the core of Russia hasn't always been right here necessarily. It's also expanded quite a bit west to what is nowadays Belarus and what is nowadays Ukraine. Here is a really fun map to help you maybe see this. Again, this is one that I feel like has come up so much in the geography space, so I'll kind of gloss over it. But basically, the start of what we consider like Slavic people and Russians, generally considered to start in the Kievian Rus, or the Kyiv Rus, which is, fun fact, the capital of Ukraine, like I mentioned before. So there is almost this weird part of the Russian heritage story that starts in Ukraine, a country which is now separate to Russia. And Russia doesn't see this as like, oh, that's quirky, this part of our country is now like separate and they do their own thing. They see this as a great tragedy. Putin, if you look at if you look into his angry speeches, his whole argument is like, yeah, this is not okay. This is, like some of our best friends in the world have been turned against us systematically, and we said over and over again, we didn't want that. We made our demands so clear, and yet you did the thing. You took our best friend and you tried to turn him against us, and so we had to invade them. Except, did he really invade Ukraine? That's the funny kind of gray area in this. So again, I feel like almost by like sympathizing with Putin, wow, it's such a bad thing. But we need to talk about this in honest, real terms, even though everything in geopolitics has this bent to it as to how you want to interpret it. So Donetsk and Luhansk are two cities that are part of Ukraine, but have not really been ruled by them for a very long time. You can see this in all sorts of weird statistics in Ukraine, but basically both the cities, which are, fun fact, in that very heavily Russian part of, they're in the very, the very deep Russian part of Ukraine, as you can see right here, where the majority of the people there are Russian. You can see that both of these cities have actually, always been closer to Russia. And in the last few years, they actually broke away. They had their whole own independence thing, and they haven't been taken back by Ukraine yet. And we can confirm that if you look at the apolitical world map. This is a world map that doesn't care about your politics and what stance you're having. It just says who in particular administers each piece of land. And so if you look at this map, you can see that, like, yeah, even though the world doesn't like what happened with, like, I don't know, Crimea or whatever, you have to say that, yeah, the people in control of Luhansk and Donetsk are two separate people republics. They're like a self-contained country that nobody in the world recognizes. Until yesterday, nobody in the world recognized these places, and I say until yesterday because because Putin yesterday decided one of his threats, one of his lines in the negotiations we've been having over the last week was maybe we recognize those regimes, huh? And so today they decided to do that. And once you recognize these breakaway regions, which again are breakaway regions, it's just the whole world says that, well, rightfully, they didn't have a right to break away. They didn't have a, legitimate cause to. They just kind of did and have been controlling themselves ever since with a lot of military help from some, people in plain clothes who suspiciously come from Russia. But that's a whole weird side point for another time. But these are not official republics by the rest of the world's guide, but because Putin and the Russian Republic sees them as a breakaway regions, well, what happened when he sent his troops into eastern Ukraine is no. He has not committed an invasion. He has not invaded another country. How dare you say that about him, sir? He has he has sent his troops in to commit some friendly military assistance, send some Russian military vehicles just to help out in the separatist-held areas of Luhansk and Donetsk. And they wanted his troops to be there. They asked nicely, could you send some troops over? And Putin, being the good guy that he is, that recognizes these small upstart countries, was like, yeah, sure, I'll send my military in there. That doesn't help benefit me in other ways. Like, yeah, I'm just good. I guess if I have to help out, I guess I'll do that. And I'm really disgusted with you guys in Kiev that I had to do this. You guys should have been helping them out and recognizing their independence. And it's a very deep, weird, or again, people like to say the word gaslight too much on the internet, but this is an example of you are stating your version of reality over and over again, despite the fact that it literally, not figuratively, literally contradicts with every other UN member state and what their view of reality is. He's saying it anyway, and Russia's a big country, the biggest, in fact, and so maybe you can argue that that is enough to get things through. In reality, what's been happening ever since, if you look at it, is there's been sanctions after... live, right now, as I'm a barrage of sanctions over the escalation, and you can see non-stop, basically. Again, it's a live, crazy thing. We should not hesitate to take action, and so things are going crazy over there in Ukraine right now, as you might imagine. And so I wanted to talk about why this even happened in the first place. Why were there tensions that led to this happening? Because I mentioned there was a week of negotiations where this was one of the things on the table. Long story short, Ukraine being an integral part of Russia means that Russia wants to keep Ukraine close as a friend. And historically, Ukraine has been, again, when you like look at Europe, you can see there's Western Europe and Eastern Europe, but then you can see there's like Far East Europe, where like things like the EU don't expand, where like the general quality of life that Europe enjoys is like a couple grades down, the countries like Moldova or Belarus or Ukraine. And the things that those three countries interestingly have in common is the fact that they are former Soviet republics and not just former Warsaw Pact countries. Poland was not a part of the USSR. I'm not going to say that. Is Union of Soviet something republics. There's a second R in there. Second S in there, sorry. Anyway, so Poland was a part of the Warsaw Pact. In fact, it was named after it. So it was like a country that was allied with Russia, but like they had to let them go eventually. Sure, fine. If you look at the expansion of NATO over time, this is what the Soviet Union looked like in, I think, 1951, and this is what NATO looked like in 1951, and this is what NATO looks like now. And this is the Soviet Union, i.e. no Soviet Union. And you can see that it's expanded literally as east as it can go, and it keeps on trying. They've been courting the countries of Ukraine and Georgia, literally former Soviet republics for quite some time. It would be the equivalent, if you can try and imagine it, if Washington State and Texas broke away from the US. No, it's got to be like more historic even. To make this truly fair, it'd be like if New York State broke away and joined Canada, and then after that, well, actually, it'd have to be independent, I guess. New York State goes independent, and then also they're like, ooh, we've decided to become a part of China now, if that's okay. You good with that? Like, we'd like to be the 57th Chinese province or whatever. Is that all good with you guys? And America would be like, no, we disagree with that very concept. And so that is the kind of vague idea, if you want to get a feeling for like, yeah, there is a valid fear underneath it, but the methods are the things that we have to say, ooh, well, that's not so valid. And that's why making the methods gray area makes this whole thing just a mess rather than a clear violation of international law. It's a muddy violation of international law. It is still definitively a violation, but the thing about laws and proving them and, human reality and stuff. Anyway, so the whole thing is that Ukraine wanted to join NATO. That was the whole demand that Putin had on the table this whole time. You make an iron cast guarantee they cannot join NATO, and we call off all the troops that are at the border, which obviously aren't there for an invasion. They're just there because we just, it's a really friendly resting place. And the funny thing about this to me, the reason that I think because I just laid out why it's such a gray area and why clearly, Russia is in the right for having their opinion, while and why we in the West are like, well, we're just expanding our security alliance. It's just an alliance that says, well, when any nation in NATO is attacked, it's treated like an invasion on your member state, basically saying attack one of us and you attack us all. Very good for the countries that maybe could use of that backing. And you might be saying, well, yeah, obviously me in the West in a NATO country, very strong NATO country, I'm just saying, yeah, I mean, they just want to join us in this pretty cool club we have, and Russia's like, we don't want them to join the club. But the reason that it gets messy and the reason that it things are maybe justifiable is because you can say, well, Ukraine says, no, don't fall into this. We want to join NATO regardless of what threats they're making. Please don't sign an agreement that we can't join your club because we would like to join that club. I think you should listen to our voices on this one. This is the Ukrainian Security and Defense Minister, in case you're curious, saying that definitively. And it's like, oh, well, that makes things difficult, doesn't it? That's why this isn't an open shut case of sign the agreement saying they won't join NATO or else, because then you're like, oh, yeah, we can't really, that's abandoning a country. That is to go back to that famous one war that everyone knows. It's a form of appeasement. Yeah, you can have this one, but any more than that, you can't have, because you don't want to give away roughly 40 million people to a regime that maybe you're not on good terms with. And that is why things are messy in Russia and Ukraine, because Russia sees it as yeah, this is our historic center. And of course, they cannot join an alliance that is basically, because if we're being honest, the reason, if you look at why does NATO exist? What is the one threat that they maybe have? Oh yeah, it's the state that Russia is now the successor to. So given that is the case, Russia sees it as just a direct threat almost. Not necessarily to invade, but it means that if Russia wants to do things, there'll be a direct consequences for it. It's the same way, again, we can talk about this forever, the equivalents that you can make. And that's actually where I wanted to lead today's video as to why it is such a close thing, because Russia and Ukraine, even now, even during the craziness of the tensions, they are two very close countries. A Russian and a Ukrainian can get along, I've heard, when they go to other places in the world. They have that close bond, like you might see between, I don't know, what are two other close countries? Wow, thank you for asking. Let's go through them today. Because in the world of international countries, you would expect that countries are there's 193 independent countries, and some of them have made friends with each other, but that's just, there's friends or not friends, and that's how countries exist. However, in reality, there are countries that are better friends than others. I mean, people always say stuff like, oh, the US has this special relationship with the UK, which I think is a British invention. I think every country in Europe thinks that they have a special relationship with America. America's playing the field, doing a very good job, have to give that to them. But in reality, I'd say the two closest countries in North America are the United States and Canada. I mentioned it in my video about border crossings and stuff, but in reality, the US, is yeah, Canada, you go along, you do your thing. You can be independent, but here's some good stuff. There's a lot of benefits for them being trade partners, and Canada's yeah, we're a fully independent country. Our neighbor to the south, they're good friends of us, not realizing the disparity in power, and it works for both of them, right? Australia and New Zealand, like, they are two incredibly close nations. Compare either one of these countries' relations with another country to their relations with each other, and it's not even close. I would argue, I know this is the spicy one, the UK and Ireland, of course it goes without saying, because I looked into a list of countries, like, okay, so here's a place to start to find friendly countries, places that only border one other country. So it's like, okay, Lesotho and South Africa, pretty close. Vatican City and San Marino, Italy, pretty close. The list starts to fall apart when you're like, well, Denmark is probably closer to Sweden than to Germany, and Germany's probably closer to Austria than to than to Denmark. And the Dominican Republic and Haiti have a very strong hate-hate relationship with each other. So, like, maybe this isn't a perfect list, but then, again, if you look around the world, you can see that some countries do just gravitate closer together, sometimes physical proximity, sometimes for, the cultural, everything like that, and sometimes a mixture of the two. Like, Sweden and Norway and Denmark, all incredibly close. They have a weird passport union where even within the EU, they're extra integrated. You look at Germany and Austria, and to some Austrians, it's like, yeah, there's just, it's like, at one point they almost merged, right? The UK and Ireland, even though there's a big thing like, oh, yeah, if you're an Irish person on the internet, let's be honest, most of the Americans who say they're Irish on the internet, but oh yeah, you hate the UK so much because of that history, oh, it's so bad. And that's like a part of the myth, the narrative too. But also there are no two countries that are as similar as the UK and Ireland, in my opinion, especially because the UK controls Northern Ireland, which is, fun fact, some of the reason why we have some issues right there. Anyway, so Ukraine and Russia are in that club. I would say Belarus and Russia are also in that club. And so that is why it is so tragic to see a country, again, imagine if you were on my list of countries, imagine one of your countries joining a foreign power. Again, the easy enemy of the world is China, but imagine them joining Saudi Arabia or Iran, you'd be like, oh, come on, guy, you're meant to be good. You're meant to be a good guy in the club like me, and that is why it is so hard, in my opinion, to really address the situation. Russia has done something that is very clearly bad, and the clear answer should be, well, in this situation where we have a disagreement, shouldn't Ukraine's opinion be important right here? And ultimately, yeah, I think that's the stance I would say. But then I would also say that, well, we have all sorts of other issues around the world where the people of a place don't want a thing and we just kind of accept it. Are we making a difference right here? We're having a difference in our policy just because they conveniently are joining our cool gang and would give us little benefits. And also, here's the other thing. If Ukraine does get invaded, I would say even now, it doesn't look necessarily perfectly likely. I think this is as far as Russia goes for now. But here's the thing. We probably assumed that after the Crimean annexation via referendum. They had a referendum on, do you want to go independent or do you want to join Russia? And 97% of people said they want to join Russia. That's crazy, right? It's it's crazy that, obviously for now this is all they want. The long-term goal Russia actually wants is they want to get the gang back together. Belarus, Ukraine, join the gang again. Maybe get some Kazakhstan in there later. They want to get the gang back together. They feel like the Soviet Union, sure, the politics of it wasn't their thing. What if we had a Soviet Union, but like a Putin Soviet Union? That's I feel. And there is again, I feel like when you look at Putin's particular history himself, and it's like he just saw the country collapse around him, saw everything go to hell. It's like, yeah, that would suck. Again, the only equivalent you can make is if the US lost the Cold War and they agreed to let 25 states go independent, and then one by one, California joins the Soviet Union, and then or the Warsaw Pact, a defensive alliance with Russia, and then Oregon does, and then Idaho does, and then you draw the line. You say, no, you're not taking New York, or you're not taking what's the place Americans care about? Because I know I'm making the joke that most Americans don't like California. No, you're not taking Kansas, or I mean, no one would make a fight for Kansas. Let's be honest. You're not taking Tennessee if we don't have, or Texas. There we go. You're not taking Canada. There we go. You took 25 of our states, but we're gonna defend Canada if that's what it takes. And this was a dumb video. Hope you all enjoyed it though. If not, second channel. Don't care. Bye. Oh, my chair is green screen. Look at that. Kind of inappropriate to have a Minecraft chair while I'm talking about Russia invading Ukraine. But welcome to the second channel. Also, if you want to support bad videos, then you can head over to patreon.com/toycat, where you can, join and see weird polls and, you know, let's be honest, give me money for content that definitely doesn't deserve it. The budget will stay this low regardless of how much money you give me. It's just me being a filthy cash grabber, which is okay if you want that. And if you don't want that, then second channel, don't care. Bye.